I did also have some slides, but we've had some technical issues, and we don't have them, so you'll just have to imagine what I'm about to say. So my name's Ed Goodall, and I work for Whale and Dolphin Conservation. And I just want us to imagine that we're just going back in time to the 1960s. So in the 1960s, the world was at war, there was a lot of political uncertainty, and whales were being hunted relentlessly, more efficiently than ever before, in every corner of the global ocean. We knew that we were driving them to extinction. The science had been showing us for decades. An international body, the International Whaling Commission, had been set up a few decades before to try and tackle this problem when we realized that we needed to reverse the trend. But we carried on regardless, knowing the future that we were going to get to. And I did have a really nice slide here of us killing whales, and the graph was going right up like that, and then there was another one next to it of a hockey stick graph of carbon emissions, and it was a wonderful parallel, so you'll just have to imagine that. But in 2023, we still have whales, certainly not as many as we did. 3 million of them were killed, and some populations were reduced down to less than 1% of their historical maximum, but they're still here. So what happened, and what lessons can we learn from that? So we learned to listen. In the 1970s, Dr. Roger Payne and his wife Katie taught us that whales have songs. They put them on records in the National Geographic magazine and sent them all around the world, and it sold millions of copies. And people felt more connected to whales than they ever had done before, just as ancient cultures did and modern oceanic indigenous people do today. And there was outcry, and there were protests, and there was a mass mobilization of people against the interests of a few in a dying industry. And it took a few years, but commercial whaling was largely halted. And some species, especially humpbacks, have undergone a tremendous recovery in those intervening decades. And humpbacks, some populations are almost back at their baseline levels, so it just shows what we can do. Other species are slower to recover, but it was a widespread human connection that changed, a widespread human connection to nature that changed the fate of the whales. We stopped that incessant slaughter, but whales do still, unfortunately, suffer from many threats today, from entanglements in fishing gear, to noise pollution, to interactions with vessels, and climate change itself. We have to save the whales all over again. But now we know some really interesting things about whales that we didn't know back in the 1960s. We know that they, along with lots of other animals, are playing really important roles in their ecosystems, and roles that we have to start taking seriously. Whales contribute to essential nutrient cycling within the ocean, and by extension, they have a role in the carbon cycle. They contribute directly to carbon sequestration, as they're really large animals. They have a lot of carbon-based life forms like we are. And when they die, a lot of the time they sink to the bottom of the sea. And when they sink below 1,000 meters, you may have heard some of this earlier on, that carbon can be considered sequestered into the deep sea. When they're alive, and they're not just valuable when they're dead and sinking to the deep sea, when they are alive, they are feeding at depth, coming up to the surface and bringing nutrients from deep in the ocean to the upper layers of the ocean, where that's used by phytoplankton. And phytoplankton are the base of the entire marine food web, but they're also fixing carbon into the ocean, and some of that carbon can be stored into ocean life, and some of that carbon can also be sequestered later on. There's a lot of uncertainty around this at the moment, but it is fundamentally a positive feedback loop mechanism. But because of that uncertainty, Whale and Dolphin Conservation have created the Climate Giant Research Program, and we've identified key knowledge gaps within this particular area of science through the International Whaling Commission and Convention on Migratory Species, and we are fundraising for and investing in these kinds of projects to fill those knowledge gaps so that we're able to advance that knowledge and understanding and then take that into meaningful policy change. We also have a rather large problem in 2023 with knowing how many whales there actually are, which is bonkers. Blue whales are the biggest creature that's ever lived, but we know that there's somewhere between 5,000 and maybe 15,000 of them. We only found out a couple of weeks ago in a new peer-reviewed paper where some of them go to breed, which is just crazy. And if we want to enact the conservation interventions needed to restore populations, we need to understand where they're going, what areas are important for them. So we have a partnership project with a company in Germany called, the company's called BioConsult, and the project is called Space Whale, because now we have the modern technology to use very high resolution satellite imagery and artificial intelligence to actually find where whales are across the entire global ocean, reducing the amount of people, time, and power that's needed. And this technology, if it can be scaled, it's working technology. It can really revolutionize what we're able to do in marine conservation with whales and dolphins. And so we know what we need to do. We know how we need to do it. So what's stopping us? Funding is absolutely one of those things. Out of all of the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal number 14, life underwater, is the least well funded. Less than 1% of philanthropic giving goes to the ocean projects. It covers 71% of our planet, and without it, and without their life within it, Earth would be 35 degrees centigrade hotter than it is now. None of us would be here. The other thing stopping us is our own inherent connection to nature. We're so far removed from it, most of us, in our daily lives, but we have to remember that we are animals of the earth. And finding that connection to it and other animals has previously changed the course of history. We desperately need that to happen again. So next time you have a quiet moment, take 5 minutes for yourself and listen to some whale song. And who knows, if enough of us do that, what might happen if we all tune in. Thank you.